What is up, y'all? I am here with a former friend, not a former friend of mine, but a former friend, the band name. I like to describe people's sound at the beginning of this, but I actually think you do a lovely job of describing your sound on your Facebook page. You say you're like Gothic Americana. I really kind of get that vibe. So, I guess maybe if you had to give someone a longer elevator pitch, more than just like the business card, what would you kind of describe your sound like?
Yeah, so it's funny that it probably the description probably sounds pretty great from the website because my partner had a hand in it, and she's a journalism professor who knows how to craft a good elevator pitch. But basically, we kind of settled on dark Americana, or we've jokingly said Americana Gothic amongst ourselves. Um, we look at folk music and the history of uh, folk in the troubadour sense as being part of a much broader movement than it's typically pigeonholed into, uh, and that spans everything from Carlo Woody Guthrie to Louis Armstrong to all the way up to Tom Waits, Leonard Cohen, and people like that, Nina Simone. These are all folk artists. In my view, punk rock is a folk movement born out of speaking truth to power and extending music as a voice for music and arts as a voice for the marginalized and oppressed, um, and and accessible to working class folks. So that's kind of how we view it. A former friend is just something born out of that lineage.
Very cool. Yeah, I would say that if folks aren't familiar and they want to kind of get a good check on your sound just before they get in too, there's kind of two different sounds that are sort of hot right now, especially on TikTok, that I think that you sort of play almost in between. Obviously, like Gothic music has had like a huge resurgence in the last few years, and then also there's this thing called indie folk. I don't know if you know about that. That's pretty popular with folks, especially again on TikTok. And I would say your music doesn't sound like anti folk. It's not quite as like intentionally off character, but it's got kind of, because of that darker sort of flair, it's got some of that same, like, I think if you were looking for something that's a little bit folky or a little bit Americana, but you kind of want it to be like the otter character in the bunch, it's maybe even like a step if you before you listen to something like Go Hang, which is very like intentionally abrasive, you know. So yeah, I really dug the time I got to spend checking you out before this. So what song of yours would you recommend if you want someone who's like totally new to the band to just like check something out?
So the song is Simple Fool, which is the first track off of our first and only album to date. We have a new one coming out this year or in 2025. That song kind of sets the vibe a little bit for who we are. It really, sonically, it really kind of taps a lot of the areas that I'm interested in and that we are interested in as a group. I grew up on The Cure and Joy Division and bands like that, and really found my voice through country music, really. So it's kind of a mix of those things, which lo and behold turns out to be basically R&B, and my concentration is really centered around this kind of intersection of country and R&B and other forms of American music that existed maybe 100 years ago. I think at one point you had Hank Williams Sr. and Cole Porter and guys like these all crafting new sounds and new songs happening at the same time, and nobody was really bound to a genre's distinction at that time. Genres were really something that was crafted by the industry to sell records and to appeal to people based on tribalism. Uh, and So when the genres didn't exist, there was a lot of intersection and styles overlap. So sonically, I think it taps that with some of the formative Gothic hints that really informed me and turned me onto music at a very young age. So sonically, that's the tune that would probably that is a probably good intro to what we do. Really taps a lot of the instrumentation that we kind of use, the Wurlitzer and a certain tone and sound aesthetic. Lyrically, it was written It was written right after the first Trump election and really speaks to the current zeitgeist, and the idea that there's well-meaning folks that don't have each other's best interests at heart all the time, and how we can only really find commonality through our own acts of brazen foolishness. In this case, might have been influenced by family members, people that we know and love who may have voted for Trump.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, and I think that communicates clearly. I'm curious. So you've mentioned kind of a lot of other artists, and it sounds like you really take almost this perspective of like looking at your sound and looking back at kind of a lot of folks that come before you, and some people might call that lineage or the canon or just culture generally, and that seems to be important to you, just even from our brief interaction. So could you talk maybe more about, how you view that kind of history of music and how that's kind of gotten you where you are now?
Sure. I mean, to cite them directly, yeah, I do believe in kind of a lineage that um, uh, goes back to, I think I mentioned Louis Armstrong, Hank Williams, and kind of carries on, in my view, to a certain spirit that exists in Nina Simone, Leonard Cohen, Tom Waits, Nick Cave, PJ Harvey, artists like this, who speak truth to power, but in a very honest way. And I'm not, like it's always important to kind of concentrate on sources of inspiration and from a positive aspect. So I only mention this just to draw a juxtaposition, but say something. Bono speaks truth to power, but it doesn't always come from an honest place, in my perspective. From my perspective, and I'm talking about artists who their sole act of defiance is through their art, where they aren't influenced by agenda. They are poets, and when the world is crumbling around them, all they have to do is pursue and exhibit their art. And I like to think I'm part of that lineage. In fact, I'm probably just a student of it who has the benefit of practicing on some level.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. It does connect to that. I think that's something that almost sometimes gets lost if you're more just like a casual folk music listener, or you're only kind of like cursorily familiar with it. Is that a lot of folk music almost has that punk sensibility of like it's working class music. It's kind of trying to be authentic and like revolutionary in a sense, just by kind of being relatable. So yeah, that's really well spoken.
Well, and the smaller the movement, the more, quite often, the more impactful is. But we don't know that because it's not a vehicle that's built to be commercialized or to
It's
be.
not brandable as
Yeah, it's
much.
not
Yeah.
brandable. So like one of my big early influences that's really helped me kind of tap into my moral compass was Fugazi and Ian McKay, and that's and they certainly influenced me musically too. But really, I kind of established a work ethic and a creed from that.
Cool. Very cool. So yeah, you've kind of given me a lot of like names of like artists that have influenced you. I'm curious. So I haven't seen you yet. I definitely hear a lot of like upright bass or like that kind of style of playing. So are you an upright bass player, or
Yeah,
can you maybe give me
yeah.
an overview of like how'd you get into music? How did that get you where you are? Because I love kind of seeing maybe like the footprints in the sand on how someone ended up like making the kind of music they do now.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I started on piano. That was my first instrument. As a young kid, I grew up in a pretty poor neighborhood, and there was one lady in our neighborhood who had a piano, and I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. Not only did she have a piano, but she had air conditioning, so that made us very much want to go over to her house and practice piano. And um, And I wouldn't say that I instantly fell in love with it. I think I discovered a certain aptitude, but she was a pretty rigorous instructor, and I shied away from it once I got into junior high. Once I discovered guitar in high school, it brought me right back to it. I discovered the joy in it, and I started playing double bass many years later, and now writing the majority of our tunes on double bass. But really, the way I found myself to a lot of the creative work that we've done in a former friend is through the studio. I love certain sounds, so like Wurlitzer 200A, like that. I discovered that sound through classic records, everything from Ray Charles, who actually played a Wurlitzer 145, to ELO and certain bands that I didn't realize until many years afterwards. I was like, oh, that's that sound. Sufjan Stevens on that Carrie and Lowell album has some great Wurlitzer tones, and I just wanted to tap those. I just wanted to find a reason and an avenue. And in the process of songwriting, I'm a big fan of hip hop too. I'm listening too many genres here to claim that there's anything that I don't love. But like um, the double bass kind of gives me that hip hop sensibility, coming in on the low end on the 1 and the 3 and being able to rhyme in between and having that certain cadence and rhythm is a source of pure joy for me, much like the Wurlitzer was in creating space and tunes. And similarly with guitar, I'm a huge fan of certain classic sounds. I play a Telly through a Fender Deluxe Reverb, and maybe a Magnetone with its vibrato is my favorite amplified sound of all time. The list, we can go on and on with this all day. I'm often influenced by sounds more than people,
Right.
but but yeah, this is kind of my background and how I found my way through songwriting.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I had kind of a similar experience with the piano. I played as a kid and I took lessons, and my parents like bought a piano, and then there was this kind of the sense of like you have to be well behaved playing piano. Like I know that's not true, but I think like through taking lessons with a proper teacher, and also like my parents, if I would start like banging and just kind of playing around, my parents would be like, "This is an expensive piece of furniture, don't mess it up." And then so I quit playing music for a while, and then when I got into playing guitar, yeah, it was just like, well, this was like a shitty $150 guitar that I bought with my money, and I can fuck it up in any way I want.
Yep,
And that kind
exactly.
of
And
sense of freedom really, is, I think, conducive to play.
I would add organ to that as far as something that's a little bit freeing and yeah, I'm down to fuck up an organ too,
There's
just like a
totally
guitar.
piano players too who like, they play like rockin', like, and I even think that like, I love classical music, so it's kind of like I'm not really like saying, oh, it's like stuffy or it's bordered. It's just like I think kind of the social context around the music more than the music itself or how it's played or the instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned kind of a lot about being interested in different sounds. You kind of like playing around with that. So take me through kind of the development of a song. Like when you write a song, I'm guessing it starts on the upright bass, maybe some poetry. Where does it go from there? Like how do you get a song from the void to like ready to play live or ready to, put out on a streaming platform?
That's a hard one. I don't think that it ever happens the same way twice exactly. I think everybody discovers their own formula in their pursuit. I think what has worked for me over the years is having a level of patience, a lack of attachment to things that I'm writing. There are tunes that that I maybe started and just couldn't connect to anything. Just maybe like the subject matter was a little vapid, or maybe it just had a good riff and that was it. Or I couldn't necessarily hear the other pieces while I was playing it. And then 10 years goes by and something else comes along and snatches up that old idea. Um, and I just try to make myself open to that possibility in all things and not get too attached to anything I'm currently working on. A lot of what guides me in my songwriting process is the idea behind it to begin with. So again, I write a lot and speak a lot to the current zeitgeist because that's our world. That's what we need to be aware of. That's what we need to be cognizant of. Um, uh, but and only by being aware of it am I uh, uninhibited by it. So so as I maintain that level of awareness around whether it's geopolitical issues or whatever, as I maintain a level of awareness around that, um, a certain uh, poetic kind of reconciliation takes place in my head that I try to then let form in words organically. And sometimes the lyrics come first, sometimes the song breeds the lyrics, but everything always starts with an idea or focus that's non-agenda driven.
Very cool. You know, it's so charming to me whenever I hear any, and I think so many musicians are this way, saying like, "Oh yeah, a lot of times I just like didn't love a thing and I threw it in my back pocket," or like I wrote a song but it wasn't the right time for it. We're just finishing up recording a song that I wrote like literally 10 years ago. And I always feel weird about that. But then I remember hearing, I really like Jeff Rosenstock, and he's like, oh yeah, this song was from like 7 years ago. It just wasn't right for anything, or like, I just couldn't figure out a verse two or something like that. And so it's interesting to me to hear you kind of say some of the same thing of like, a lot of times it's just like not being precious and thinking, I don't have to finish this right now, or maybe I don't finish it ever. But sometimes I was describing this to a drummer the other day. It's like, sometimes you get a riff that you love and you can't figure out a song you love it in. And then one day you're like, oh, I wrote a song in E minor. I have an E minor riff. Can I fit, it's like getting a piece of puzzle out and you're just like, does it work? It's so exciting.
It is exciting, and
Yeah,
far be it from us to question that process. I know musicians who are creative souls who create in music as their format the way that graffiti artists pursue their craft. They just throw it up there, and something brilliant comes out, and it's without intent and it's pure. And so far be it from me, my purpose is to construct something that I consider lasting on whatever level. But far be it from me to question that process of being able to walk away or to become over attached to something in a moment.
yeah. I think that it all works in different ways, and I love that. So cool. So I feel like every songwriter has parts about songs or recording like that they really geek out about and love, but it's not necessarily the thing that would scream at you when you listen to the music. And so I'll give you an example of what it is for me is I really love in a lot of our music, I tried to make like weird song structures or like strange, left turns inside of a song feel natural or accessible. We have a song that I love that's just like verse, a little guitar break, verse, bridge, outro. And it's like, that's for the kind of music we write, not that normal. For folk music, very normal. But I'm kind of wondering, like, if you had to describe, that thing about songwriting that like really gets you jazzed, but doesn't necessarily, scream when you listen to your music, what would that be?
This kind of for me, this kind of runs parallel to the production process too, right? There's a lot of things that we do in the studio as producers or engineers that get overshadowed. And if you're doing your job well in the studio, quite often nobody's going to notice the cool little tricks that you pulled out to make this or
Right.
that pop. One in particular that stands out is in the concert pursuit and effort of promoting my album. One that stands out is on the song PMH, or Phoenix Memorial Hospital. We really didn't know what to do with the lead portion of it, and used a theremin, and it was a blast. It took about 2 or 3 hours to finally nail it, but we got it. and have never even laid hands on a theremin since that session, you know. And these are the things that kind of make it fun. And most people don't notice that when they hear it. I think most people think it's an organ typically with a
Yeah.
Leslie, but these are the things that are fun and things that maybe only you know. The you know the Fiona Apple's last album,
Vegetable
Vegetable
culture.
Cutters,
So
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, excellent. But the fact that it was in home during COVID, dog barking in the background, these things were not lost on me. I'm sure they weren't lost on most people.
Right.
These things they're those indelible, important parts of a greatly produced record.
Yeah. That almost kind of reminds me of, I always feel like that's what I hear when I'm listening to like, especially 2010s indie records. Like if I think about like Wilco, I guess they're a little bit earlier than 2010s, or like what's the band name? Modern Vampires of the City is the album I like, but you know, it's just like it's just interesting to kind of like go back and listen to a lot of those records. It's not like written the way you think like a pop punk album where it's like there's a guitar player or two guitar players and there's bassists and there's drums and you kind of like everyone kind of plays sort of their role and they might play around, but ultimately like the ensemble is the ensemble the same way like a string quartet is. But I think a lot of like indie artists in the last 20 years or so, you mentioned like Sufjan, another example of like it's almost using the producer role as kind of the inspiration for the sonic palette, and then it's kind of like how do we go and translate that on a tour? And maybe this segues into a good talking point because I saw on it was either your Facebook page or website, you said that you could perform as like a solo act or as a duo act or as a collective. So tell me, like, how do you make that modular kind of thing happen? And also, what are you going to be doing for our gig on the 27th?
Sure. Yeah. So for first off, I agree with you that mid 2000s era is a great time for experimentation in pop music. Acorn Family, bands like that, Animal Collective, and things. They were fantastic, and they were doing that. And I think what I saw in a lot of those bands around that time was uh, this might I don't know. This might be where I've gotten some of my work ethic from, but my perspective has always been you do the best you can with the tools you have at your disposal at the time. And that's what I do in the studio. And I don't think that the road is necessarily any different. We used to hold out only for tours that we could do with the full band all the time, but we were just on the road a lot less. And as a result, I'm not doing what I feel like I need to be doing as much. And so, so I started touring solo. At first, I really hated that. And then I realized how it was influencing my music and making me return back to the band setting with a different perspective on our songs and a different perspective in my songwriting. The songs became a little bit more universal, a little bit more pliable. And lo and behold, I was shocked by this. It was more substance than style when everything was said and done.
Yeah.
The songs are denser that way, and so like it really informed me to be diverse in my performance approach, as well as in and how that would play out in my songwriting too.
Very cool. Yeah, I think the translation to the live experience is something that I find interesting and very compelling. And I wish more bands would consider that as an option, especially now we live in a landscape where so many bands play with backing tracks or like put a lot of stuff in the tracks. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. But there's some bands that I kind of just am like, maybe you don't need the extra rhythm guitar part there. Like maybe the two guitarists you have like would make a compelling live sound, and it's just like it feels a little different. Or we do things like we have a keyboard player in our group, and so sometimes if like I would have recorded a double guitar lead, we might just say like it sounds cool double guitar on the recording, but maybe we just give that upper third to the keyboard player live, and it's more or less the same energy, and gives him something extra to do there. Yeah, I really respect that. And
Yeah, I mean, like here's the deal. I'm a working class musician, so like
right.
my job is never to uh, uh, regale an arena full of people. I don't even think I'd be good at that. The my job is to have an exchange, And I think by promoting a polished product, which is the record, over that exchange is undermining the entire cause of what I'm doing. We have 6 members typically in our band, and we tour with 4 members pretty regularly. The this tour there will be 2 of us, and it'll actually be a different 2 for both halves of the tour. When we play with you guys, that'll be the my partner and I will be. She plays Amanda Jane. She plays flute and sings. She's the other vocalist that you'll hear on the album, and the flautist. And we will do the first 2 weeks together, and then the next month will be spent with our guitar player and mandolin player. He's going to fly down and meet me in Atlanta, and so it'll be upright bass and guitar and mandolin. And it'll be a great time. And then we'll get back and we'll do the thing with the full band again. And sometimes we'll play shows where we mix it up and do a couple without everybody on stage. This is putting in my this is my best attempt to put the music before anything else,
Right.
which is a lot to say for somebody who wrote the music.
Yeah. I'm one, I want to say your partner's flute tone is great.
Thank you.
Really like
Appreciate it.
clear, crisp. The flute can sound like overly breathy, I think sometimes, and I think that she gets a really good sound out of it. Yeah, I'm excited about that, and I really like what you're kind of talking about. This like sense of almost it's like intimacy, right? This like relationship to the audience. This is again like I don't have anything wrong with folks who play with backing tracks or play with a click. This is part of the reason why like we don't do that in our group is that like I want that sense of like, can something go off the rails or could we rush this because the audience has that kind of like we want to really push something or like, I think that kind of sense of it's live isn't superior, but to me it's fun, and I like the kind of the way you're talking about of like that what you're interested in is not the cleanest thing, which some people are after, which is great, but more just that sense of like, hey, we're both here together. And I think that it fits the aesthetic of your music well. So that's cool
It's
to
just
hear.
its own thing, I mean, that
Yeah.
if we're meant to just write a tune, record it, tour with exactly that format, and then rinse, repeat, that sounds like a great day job, but I don't know that it is
What you're looking
passion
for.
pursuit. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I see it the same way. And there's, I definitely know artists that I respect that they're like, no, I want to be like pristine, polished, and in a different sense. And I think it's mainly just knowing what's your aesthetic, what is ultimately the art that you're after.
Well, and again, like I mentioned, we do the best with what we have at any given moment. And that really does mean the best that we can do with that, So,
Right.
so whatever we do take on the road is typically rather polished.
Cool. Very cool. So, I think there's also a lot of stuff as a group that you can care about in being a band. And I feel like it's almost impossible to care about everything that you could. So I'm wondering, what's something that you think that about recording or songwriting or about being a band that like some people are really precious about, but you're like, I just like you're saying, do my best. And that's not necessarily the where I lose sleep at night if it doesn't do this or that.
So I'm in the studio and instrumentation, I am a jack of not all, but a lot of trades and a master of absolutely none. So my perspective in the studio is to get the job done, and I don't mind doing 50 takes to get where I need to be with it. But every single person that we play music with, every single person that's in our band is a multi-instrumentalist. And like I said, there's anywhere from like 6 to 8 people that we play with regularly on stage, and every single one is a multi-instrumentalist. And I think that is a group of people that I want to be around, So I have all the respect in the world for people who are tried and true and dedicated to their instrument and virtuosic in it.
Right.
But that's not for me.
Yeah, I totally feel you. There's like, I feel like a lot of folks kind of do one of the two paths, right? Like in orchestrating I'm looking at texture and like trying to get all the different sounds, seeing the forest. And some people are like, I want to make the perfect tree. I will be the best guitarist and I think both are really cool, but I agree. I'm sort of also like a big picture guy that way. So great. Just two more fun short questions. So first one, you finish your gig, you're hungry. What's your ideal post-show meal?
Probably a shot and a beer. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
keep it simple.
Yeah. On a good night, I do not drink too much before playing, and I would say that goes for most nights. But
Right.
there is something that I'll never shake about wanting a nice libation right after we play.
Very cool. Very cool.
It used to be a cigarette. I used to really want a cigarette after we played, but thankfully, that's no longer a habit for me.
Nice. Well, congrats. Hard to kick. So yeah, and then my last question. Obviously, community is super important for bands. That at the kind of more working class, small, local level, whatever term that you use to describe it. So I know you're I think you said you're originally from Kentucky and you're in the New England area now. And so usually I ask about other folks in Georgia that they want to that they'd recommend. But who's someone either that you are from your hometown scene or someone that you've met on the road that you really love that you'd recommend for people to check out that's also in this small band territory?
Oh God, there's honestly there's so much, so many, and to be honest, I'm from Arizona originally.
Okay.
I've had the pleasure of living all over the country. I've lived in Seattle, LA, San Diego, but I grew up in Arizona and then lived for a number of years in Kentucky, a place that I really connected with and truly loved and miss. And I met great, incredible people here in New England. One band that will always stand out and is a close personal friend of mine is the Daddy Sisters out of Bowling Green, Kentucky. Absolutely phenomenal band. That's definitely worth seeing for anybody who ever has the opportunity. And they're the ones that lead to mind. Many years ago, we had close friends that we toured with regularly out of the West Coast called Aloe. And I'm not sure if they're still playing, but they created such an incredible, beautiful, sweeping sonic landscape between two people that was just astounding. They can make a loud room quiet in a heartbeat. They're a really impactful band. And then a ton more bands that I'm gonna forget because we've just had the privilege of being on the road and meeting so many.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you for those recs. And I'm looking forward to playing together on December 27th, just after Christmas and Boxing Day. So you can celebrate 3 holidays in a row: Christmas, Boxing Day, and then I guess 4 because Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And then the former friend Ozello Paprika Kyle Lewis is a boring name show at Boggs.
That's the one.
Yeah, honestly, the most important holiday of the 4.
Right, exactly.
So very fun. Well, nice to meet you, my friend, and we will look forward to hearing you then and playing together at Boggs just after Christmas here.
Great. Thank you so much, Kyle.
Yep. Bye.